Hello and welcome back to the Alchemical Arts. Hope everybody is well today, is ready to get stuck into some more color making. Today we're going to deviate from pigment making and we're going to dive into a little bit of ink making. So we're going to look at making a traditional medieval ink known as iron gall ink. Now the reason it's called iron gall ink is because it uses oak galls and an iron source. So this is the traditional sort of blue-black ink that was used for 1,000+ years in Europe, so it was one of the main inks that was used from about the 5th century to all the way up to the 19th century. And it's basically a mixture of a tannic acid or a gallotannic acid with an iron salt. So we're going to be using ferrous sulfate, which is iron 2 sulfate, and we're going to be using oak galls. So oak galls are these sort of little bulbous, like woody bits that grow on oak trees as the response from a wasp attack, or I think like wasps trying to lay eggs, they produce these galls, and they're rich in a substance called gallotannic acid, which is a type of tannin. Tannins are in lots of sort of barks and leaves, and it's in tea and things like that, and it's a type of organic compound that you find in a lot of plant materials. So what ends up happening is we create a tannic or gallotannic acid solution by pulverizing up our oak galls and cooking them. So we're going to do a hydrolysis method, which means we heat them with water. You can also ferment them to get the acids out of it. And then basically we're going to add a solution of iron sulfate to it, and that's going to create our ink. And we're also going to add a little bit of gum arabic to give the ink a little bit more body. What's interesting about this ink is it actually doesn't become fully black until you start to write with it on the paper. So upon exposure to air, it oxidizes and it fully makes its black pigment in there. And until that happens, it's less of a black. Like you'll get a black color in the actual ink itself, but it really comes into its own once it's written out on the paper. And one of the advantages throughout history and why it was so popular in the medieval times and why it's been used for a lot of really important legal documents throughout history, so a lot of big decrees and written objects that were designed to stand the test of time, is that it's a very durable and permanent ink, so it doesn't wash off with water once you've put it down. So it's really that long-standing quality that made it an ink that people really wanted to work with and use. It does have some drawbacks. It will rust metal-based quills because of the iron acidity element in the ink, and it can eat and degrade certain papers over time. But I think on things like vellum and like animal skins that it was written on, it was very, very durable. So it's a really interesting ink. So let's get stuck into making some. It's a fairly simple process and you won't really need much to make it, so it's a really good project for people to try at home. So stick around and we'll go through each of the stages and I'll show you how you can make your own medieval ink at home. The first thing we're going to do is measure out and weigh some of our oak galls. So I've just got a little scale here and I'm going to weigh out 18 grams of these little oak galls. Okay, so we have about 18 grams. We're going to chuck that into our heavy duty mortar and pestle here. Now that we've measured out our oak galls, it's time to give them a crush. So I've just got a nice heavy duty mortar and pestle here, and I'm just going to gently try and crush them up and then grind them into a powder. If you don't have a heavy stone like granite mortar and pestle like this, you can take them outside and give them a whack with a hammer carefully to initially crush them up and then work through grinding them down in a less high intensity mortar and pestle. But I've got this and it's my best tool for this job, so I'm just going to start by gently tapping them down to try and crush them up first. There we go, they actually break pretty easily. Oop, one flew out. There we go, like so. It's important that we really work this into a fine powder, because the more surface area we have, the more gallotanic acid that we're going to extract, and it's just going to be an easier, better process. So after a little bit of grinding, this is where we ended up. As you can see, there's still some reasonable chunky bits, but all in all, it's just relatively... most of it's finely powdered, and then we have a little bit of chunkiness, but that's okay. So basically, we'll move on to the next step, which is the hydrolysis step, which is the boiling in water to extract all of our gallotanic acid. Unfortunately, I lost a tiny bit of footage there, and basically what I did was I took our powdered oak gall, I added it to 130 mils of hot water here. Basically, the recipe I'm using said to do 18 parts oak gall to 130 parts water. And basically what I'm going to do here is just turn the got the stirring going, and we've got the heat here on the hot plate. And we're just going to boil this or cook it for about an hour to an hour and a half. I'm going to gradually top up the water if it evaporates down so that I end up with a final amount of 130 mils of extracted oak gall liquid. So this process, the heat will be breaking down the gallotanic acid in there so that we basically can extract it out of the plant material. So we'll come back in about an hour's time and we'll do the filtering process. So this has been cooking for quite some time now. So now we're up to a filtering step. So all I'm going to do now is I have myself an Erlenmeyer flask here, just a simple plastic funnel and some cotton wool. So I'm just going to gently tease out the cotton wool a little bit, put that into my funnel to create a stopper, and then we're going to take our mixture of water and oak galls, and I'm just going to pour it into my filter here, into the funnel, and we're just going to filter out all of the oak gall material and just collect the liquid as we need. I'm going to pop this to the side while this may take a few minutes to do. And while we're doing that, I'm going to grab myself a beaker here, and to that beaker I'm going to add 20 mils of freshly boiled water. And to that 20 mils, I have some gum arabic that I've ground up here, and I have some iron sulfate. And we're going to add our gum arabic and start giving this a stir to dissolve the gum arabic into the hot water to make a gum solution. And this is going to help thicken our ink. This may take a few minutes of stirring to get all the gum arabic to dissolve properly into the small amount of water that we have here, but it will get there. Depending on the rawness of your gum arabic, you may have little bits of dirt and bark in your gum arabic solution here, so you may also want to filter this through a little bit of muslin cloth or even some paper towel to squeeze it through to take out any impurities that are in there. As I can see in my solution, I've got some small amounts of bark and things like that in there. So I'm going to do a little filter of this too. So once all your gum arabic has been dissolved, which mine's almost there, we're going to add in our iron sulfate as well. And we're going to give that a stir, and we're going to mix the iron sulfate until that dissolves into solution as well. made quite a thick kind of pasty solution here, but that's alright. I think this is, based on the instructions I read, this is what people said to do, so hopefully this works out right. So I've got myself a little dampened cloth here. It's got a little bit of a loose weave, but not too loose. So it's going to trap any of our particulate matter. And I'm actually just going to take my little ramekin that I had the gum arabic powder in. I'm just going to place this in there like so, making a little well. And then we're going to pour our iron sulfate and gum arabic solution into that well. And then I'm just going to carefully gather up the corners of this, and we're going to, you can see it start dripping through. Probably could have used a slightly larger piece of cloth. I'm just going to gently squeeze to have, there we go, to have our solution come through. Once I'm satisfied that I've squeezed everything I need to squeeze through. So now that everything has been filtered through, we've made up our gum arabic and iron sulfate solution, it's time to actually make our ink. So what we're going to be doing here is combining our oak gall extract, which has the gallotannic acid in it, with the iron sulfate to create the iron the fusion of the gallotannic acid and the iron sulfate makes the iron ink, and the gum arabic gives the ink a bit more of a body. So I recommend using a beaker that you don't mind potentially staining with iron stains, because it's going to make this blackish sort of ink. So I'm using an older, smaller beaker here that I've got that's already got a bit of damage at the bottom there, as you can see. So I'm not too worried about this one. You can use a glass jar or even just a little plastic drinking cup or something, but keep in mind that whatever you do end up using will probably undergo some sort of staining. So let's go ahead and make the ink. So I'm going to just slowly add this in and we'll see what kind of color transformation. Oop, there we go, we're getting a black transformation happening quite quickly. So we'll just scrape that in, the last of it, and then we'll give this a bit of a stir. Oh, there we go, we got this lovely, yeah, it's sort of this purpley black kind of color. So we're going to have to go through and do some testing on some paper to see how well our ink turned out, but as you can see there, we have this lovely dark purple black liquid, and I think we've had a reasonable success. I feel like there's a good amount of body to the ink from the gum arabic. I'm not entirely sure. Ink is not my forte, so I don't know how thick or thin we want it to be. But let's do some drawing with some paintbrushes and we'll see how our ink turns out. So here we have our prepared ink in our beaker still. Let's just do some little lines out on the page here so you can watch how it turns from this sort of translucency here. As it begins to oxidize with the air, we should get a blacker ink formed, If we do some thicker lines here, where we put a bit more ink on in a heavier application, like so. There you go, it's this beautiful blue-black colour, and it sort of settles there. And you'll see it's starting to darken already as it dries and oxidizes with the air. All in all, I think we've made a successful ink here. So I'm going to transfer this into a jar and seal it away so that it doesn't oxidize too much with the air. But I hope that this was enjoyable and that you're able to see that making simple black iron ink from the oak galls is a really relatively simple process of just boiling, mixing in the gum arabic and a little bit of iron sulfate, and away you go. You have a really nice, strong, dark ink. If you want the exact recipe that I used today for the exact measurements, you check the link in the description of the video. It'll take you to a page where I got myself the recipe that I used for today's batch of ink. And remember to like, subscribe and share this video if you enjoyed it, and let me know if you end up making your own oak gall ink. That would be great. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.